Hey guys, this is module 9.2. So in this module, we're talking about intelligence and memory in late adulthood. So this module is pretty quick because the research is very lagging in regards to intelligence and memory. You have to think about cohort effects as well. So in late adulthood, everybody just kind of assumes that intelligence declines, but we know that's not always the case. That just like you may have grandparents or great-grandparents that are still smart as a whip and can remember everything, research doesn't take into account those. So we have to look at longitudinal studies that are lacking, cohort effects that are lacking as well. And there's a lot of different medical issues that can influence cognitive function in older people as well. So there's a lot more research that needs to be done. We have tons of research with Alzheimer's and dementia and traumatic brain injuries, but when it comes to intelligence and memory, that research is definitely lacking. So Share, which we've talked about before, has some explanations as to why that research is lacking. So as you're reading your textbook, just kind of be aware of that research. In regards to how can they tell what particular age group in late adulthood and their cognitive abilities are declining in that research. It's fairly important to cognitive and memory tasks. So when you look at support for Share's research, there's no uniform pattern of age-related changes. Keep in mind, it's not universal. Everybody doesn't go through the same cognitive changes. We do see cohort groups that do have that, but overall, not all people go through those same declines. So you have to think about that in regards to that as well. There are also environmental and cultural factors that we have to deal with when we're talking about intelligence and memory issues as well. So typically, the better health you're in, the higher socioeconomic class you're in, the more likely you will not have those sharp declines in intelligence or memory issues as well. So you have to look at those outliers when we talk about intelligence. And then here, I'm just kind of showing you in regards to your textbook as you're reading what Share versus Salthouse has to say about intelligence in late adulthood. That some adulthoods, according to Salthouse, has what we call a cognitive reserve. So energy that the brain has. Some late adulthood people have certain skill sets that they have better than others. So that reserve, that energy that is in their brain that hasn't started declined, has allowed them to continue on with certain cognitive tasks. Memory and learning. Of course, memory, we do start to see some changes in later adulthood. Again, it's not always universal. Most losses occur in episodic memory, so episodes in life. What did you do for your 25th birthday? What happened on your 30th anniversary? Things like that. Semantic and implicit memories are largely unaffected. So if you kind of go back to procedures, things like that, that's what semantic memory has to do with. Short-term memory gradually declines after around age 70, and then for some, it can become more pronounced. Not for everybody. So just keep that in mind as well. Autobiographical memory, so recalling the days of one's life, usually is strongest. Because pleasant memories, we tend to hold on to those because they have a strong emotional component to them. And then changes in memory, of course, focuses on 3 different categories. Environmental factors, do they take certain medications? Are they in retirement? Not being stimulated, if you will, because they're not working. They have lower motivation to remember certain things. Then you have information processing deficits, the inability to inhibit irrelevant information, and one's thoughts start to decline because the information is just not important to them. And then the speed at which they can remember things starts to decline as well. And then biological factors, of course, if they have any type of the dementia or if they have Alzheimer's, that's going to play a part into what they can remember as well. Hormones, with the decrease of estrogen and testosterone as we go through our later years, also can impede our memories. And then, as we know, the deterioration of cells, neurons, and the frontal lobe, hippocampus region of our brain can also impair, and pretty much does impair, our memory, especially if we've had traumatic brain injuries or if we do suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So continuing to learn things can greatly improve our cognitive skill set as we get older. A lot of adults have no problem still trying to learn new skills or continue with skills that they've done their whole life. Women versus men and the different tasks that they do. They just have to physically, for some, be a little bit more careful of using tools, helping younger generation if they teach, things like that. So professors and other students find older people's life experiences more enriching in the classroom. So kind of think back to your teachers that you had in maybe high school or other college classes that are older, and how they tell you stories to relate to the content. You kind of learn and remember those information a whole lot easier because there's that emotional connection to them. Technology in later adulthood can be a little tricky for some. A lot of libraries will offer tutoring for computers, technology for the elderly as well, because they still want to feel like they are a part of the community, a part of the world going on around them, especially if they have grandkids or children that live farther away. And with the use of technology, it can help us feel like we're more connected. So they can learn it. It may take some a little bit more time to process how to use it than others. But of course, different intelligence skills are used for different tasks, so that can come into play with the ease that learning technology can be for some versus others. So this chart in your book just kind of shows you the technology differences in regards to age groups. So if you look all the way at the top, 85 plus older individuals are far less likely to use the internet than the younger generation. Why do I need to use it? What is the benefit, especially for like banking their money? They don't trust it. Credit cards, things like that, they don't trust it as much as the younger population does. So personality development and successful aging is where we're going now. So kind of think back to McCrae and Costa. We've talked about them before, the big 5 personality characteristics. Some of them remain stable across adulthood. Some of them are more changing as we get older in age as well. So of course, we can have changes in personality in older adulthood due to many different factors. Of course, we're not working, retirement, traumatic brain injuries, dementia, Alzheimer's disease. We definitely see personality changes with all those. But just not feeling like you're engaged in one's culture or community can really impact one's personality and can lead one to start acting out in different ways. And sometimes it can be good, in some ways it can be bad. So it just depends on the individual. So Erickson's last stage, his ego integrity versus despair stage, as we come to this late adulthood group. So it's where one reviews their life and kind of comes to terms with it. What have you accomplished in life? Are you fine with what you have accomplished? If you didn't accomplish something, are you okay living with that as well? There may be time for some to be able to still accomplish whatever they want to, but for others, there's no time. And are you okay with that? What have you given back to the community versus what you haven't as well? So think of all those things as well. So despair, of course, comes with the aging process. Are people unhappy? Are they depressed as they get older because maybe they're not around their friends and family as much? And of course, coming to grips with eventually we all will die. So their friends may be passing away. They may not have a whole lot of close friends. Things like that all comes to fruition in late adulthood. And for some, they accept it and they don't think about it. But for others, it can be a heavy process on their mind. So PEC's developmental task that comes into play. We have redefinition of self versus preoccupation with the work world around them. So who are they now that they're not working, versus where before they retired, that's all they could think about. So it's kind of finding the balance of their new self. Body transcendence versus body preoccupation, being accepting of their body as it ages versus worried about wrinkles and not, having all of their hair or all of their senses, things like that. And then the last stage for PEC is ego transcendence versus ego preoccupation. Ego transcendence, again, is more of a fluidity in regards to being okay with who you are, not feeling like you have to be the best at everything. Where before, especially if they were still working, it was all about protecting that sensitive ego. That's not such the case anymore as we get to late adulthood. And then Levinson's, we come back to him, his final stage, which he called the winter of life, the final season. So it's the transition time between age 60 and 65. People begin to view themselves as entering late adulthood and accepting that. Some of them really kind of struggle with being old, but not maybe really feeling old. They may feel that they can be of service to the younger population and help them, teach them new things. But it's also that balance of having freedom. You're not going to work. Hopefully you have that economic freedom where you can still go out and do different things without being on a strict budget, things like that. So all of those come into play in this latter stage of life. And then coping, how do we cope with becoming older? We have Newgarten's study in regards to 4 different personality types of people in their 70s as they get older. Not everybody goes through all of them. Some may, for just a few months to a few years, go in and out of one or 2 of the stages. So disintegrated versus disorganized personalities in regards to, they don't feel like they're part of the community. They don't feel like their life is really consistent with where they want it. They don't have any control, that type of thing. Passive dependent personality, of course, deals with the ability where people don't want to come to terms with something, especially aging. So they tend to kind of stuff those feelings down. So kind of think of a passive aggressive type of person. Defended personalities, where they defend what they've accomplished, what they haven't, in regards to they kind of want to stop the aging process and they kind of act young in a sense. They want to hold on to that as much as they can. They really have unrealistic expectations. And then integrated personalities is where they can fully immerse themselves in the community. And there's joys, and then there's things that they don't like. So it's kind of finding that balance, but they're still integrating a lot of themselves with the community as well. So life review and reminiscence, thinking back on your life. Are you okay with what happened? Things like that. So all of Erikson's, Peck, Newgarten, and Levinson's theories kind of all work together as the late adulthood population come to terms with being elderly and work becoming less, retiring, changes in how they're viewed in the community, things like that. So, and of course, here's just some benefits of reviewing one's life, consequences as well, not letting yourself get depressed, things like that. And then you have different theories. Age stratification theory view that there is an unequal distribution of resources, power, and privilege based on age. Again, there's a lot of disenchantment, if you will, with the elderly population sometimes, and they feel like maybe they didn't get everything that they wanted to achieve, so they want to be able to try their best to hold on to what they have. So I'm going to stop at this slide, and then I'm going to come back with our last PowerPoint for this chapter.